Today I wanted to talk about something that just hit me that's been going in the back of my mind lately, or for quite some time, when it comes to doing things, and especially when it comes to doing things during the weekends. And it's a question that it always makes me stop and wonder, and like why do people ask that question? Or it's like I don't quite get that question, why they ask it. But I guess it goes a little bit to show, or it reflects the way I like to live life, which might not be super conventional for everyone. But it's the question: so, what are you gonna do this weekend? And before, I used to be like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do the laundry. I'm gonna meet some friends. I'm gonna, I don't know, clean up my email inbox. I'm gonna do something productive because that's what sensible people or person do. Until I realized it's not very sensible. In the recent months, years, I'm not sure when it changed, but I don't feel like that's a sensible way to live anymore. And maybe you can relate, or maybe you ask yourself this question, but maybe now is a good time to ask yourself, do I need to do anything this weekend? And what I come to realize is myself, I don't need to do anything. I don't need to do anything. And it's so liberating. Now, I know in my family especially, especially with the women, we tend to, in our family, be like, oh, we have to do something productive, especially during the weekend, and a little bit of a self-sacrifice, and do what's best for the family, and neglecting yourself. And it's a weird dynamic, and I get it. We're humans, and we live in societies, and we need to, in families, we need to. Well, we don't need to actually, but there's this inherent thing we feel the need to work together to survive, and to some extent that is true. You don't get food without cooperating. We all contribute in our own way, even though it might not look like conventional always. At least I can speak for myself when it comes to that. But sadly, there is this one-track mindset, at least I see from my view, where certain people get caught up in, only a certain way is contributing and only a certain way is productive. And that's why we have this kind of like almost societal hierarchies. And it's connected to the question I often get when I go to family dinners. So what do you do? It's a way to place you where you are at. And people do this when you just meet them as well. Just, go to school, you get a new job, or maybe not a new job, because that defeats the purpose of the question, but maybe they'll ask you about your hobbies, right? But it's this question, who are you, basically? And your identity being tied to what you do. Like, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, or, I'm a mother of 3, or like, whatever answer you have. And the reason is, and this is not to look down on anyone, but it's because it's a somewhat limited view on identity and value, worth. let's go back to the question of um, and also I want to say, remember you are infinitely valuable, and you need to see your own worth more than just your job. We don't always choose our jobs. At least not in the beginning of our lives. We can't always choose, but obviously there's always choices to make, but don't be so hard on yourself, and especially if your family or friends or a community you're in sets very arbitrary and surface level expectations and value on certain things or jobs. It's not your responsibility to fulfill them. Your responsibility to be responsible for yourself and your needs and wants. And that might sound selfish, but I think it's the other way around. I'm realizing that it's actually the opposite, because when you do the thing that you enjoy, people will start to love you for it, and you will start to be more joyful, and that joyfulness smittens over to others. When you're miserable, especially in kind of like your circle, I suppose, if they don't know how to distance themselves in emotionally, not physically, but emotionally, and take responsibility for their own energy and own emotions, they will start to take on yours and see your problems as theirs, and they will start seeing you as a nuisance, or they will try to fix your problem, etc., etc. There's nothing wrong with supporting, absolutely. That's great, and I encourage that and help each other. But if you're happy and you're thriving, that shouldn't take away from others necessarily, and at least not, actually I'm not going to go into detail about that because that's a whole rabbit hole, but you thriving and being successful doesn't mean that other people suffer from it. Quite the opposite. Others can benefit from that, people around you, passively. I'm not even talking money, I'm just talking about being happy, for instance. When you're in a friend group, and I've been in that friend group before, a friend group full of people that are self-defeating, negative, and just spewing negative shite, it's really hard not to be negative yourself. That is why I say I don't subscribe to those kind of things anymore, those self-defeating loathing, or just kind of negative views on life. And I used to believe that I had to sacrifice myself, because that's what we learned in our family. You need to sacrifice yourself to survive. Thriving wasn't an option. It was either that or, marry someone rich, or get lucky, or do what your elders tell you, and maybe you'll make it one day. Do the right thing, but don't do the right thing for you. Do the right thing for them, which they think is right for you. But let me tell you, you know the best thing for you. You know what's best for you. It takes some time to connect to that voice and connect to that inner self, and I'm learning every day still. And the self is also something that isn't static, but you learn that, and you learn to value yourself. At least that's what I'm doing, and it becomes so much more satisfying and healthy and things start to loosen up, things starts to get better. In the beginning, it's much harder. In the beginning, it's very hard to go against the grain of your family or friends or your circle or society, because a lot of people think that you have to, like, oh, I have to work really hard and sacrifice myself and have to be in pain all the time. And I used to think that too before, but you don't. You really don't. And when you say, there's two things I noticed. When someone asks you, like, how are you doing? And I say, you know what? I'm great. I'm really happy right now. Generally. I'm not saying, like, every day is, like, sunshine and rainbows. I have my down days when I'm sad, too, but it takes much less time for me to go up again now. Sure, I get tired, and I'm figuring still out things, but I'm valuing myself and my time and who I surround myself with and what I do, and I take good care of myself to my best abilities. I try to be the best friend of my body and mind and everything. And that triggers some people. That's one thing I noticed. It triggers people when you say you're happy, and number two, when you set aside time for yourself. It's like, why aren't you miserable? Why aren't you sacrificing yourself for others? And I'm sorry, but I'm done with it. Maybe you are too, the one listening. Maybe you feel like you sacrifice yourself too much, and it was I know for me, it was a survival instinct. Because if I was seen or heard, that was a threat. I needed to be quiet. I need to not voice my opinion and put others before me. Not because I wanted to, even though I am empathic and supportive of others. It was almost like this burden. And it's so liberating to just let that burden go. It's like, you're not indebted to anyone. You're not worthless. You don't need to self-sacrifice yourself for others' happiness. You just gotta look out for you, and that is not selfish. That is the most sensible thing you can do. Others will benefit from that even. Not that I'm talking about taking advantage or anything. People will do that. Some people can, but that's why we learn to set boundaries. But it's more disingenuous, I realized, to pretend to be nice. To pretend that, or not even pretend, but just do what other people tell you is the best for you, and just suck it up, and even though you know what's best for you. No, they don't know what's best for you. They rarely know what's best for themselves. They just know things from generations, and they got trauma dumped from their elders, and they're just doing the thing they're told. And to some extent, it's not their fault. But that's why it's so hard to go against the grain. People will get triggered. People will get angry. Some people will get high in spirits, happy and inspired by it. But you got to look out for you. And some people, it's just like they won't even like you just for being you, just for being happy. Some people are like that. Sadly, I lived in my bubble thinking that everyone wanted the best for each other. I thought everyone just wanted to thrive together and work for a common cause, and a very childish view. And I think there are people out there that are like that just want to support you and see you thrive and be happy for you. But it's easy to attract narcissists in your life when you're very empathic and kind, because they take advantage of that. And it's like your light brings in flies and moths, and you can't keep, at least what I'm choosing to do is to not let those insects in to my own detriment. That sounds very condescending, but I mean this in the best way. But there are people that will leech on you and your energy, and take your kindness for granted, and you can give them a million chances. Trust me, I've been there. Maybe you can relate, but some people you just have to close the door, because no matter how kind, how patient you are with them, they don't understand. And sure, they might have their reasons for the way they are, and you can forgive them to lighten your load, but you gotta do what's best for you. You know, I'm gonna put it in an extreme scenario. Imagine someone you got to know was a really bad person, like a serial killer, or like someone that you should be careful of, right? And you're just like, no, I have to be kind to everyone, and that is how, I don't even need to explain that. You probably get my analogy there. You gotta protect yourself, and that's not to say everything is dangerous and you need to always be on guard. No. Being open-hearted and be open-hearted and kind and all you are. But sometimes you just have to set your foot down and say, you know what, is this really, mutually giving situation? It's not always give and take. It's like, or what I used to think before, only what I can give, and then I could maybe receive something back if I'm lucky. No, it's when you find those relationships that are mutually giving and supportive in different aspects of your life and your being, that are really magical. Sometimes they can be hard to find. I know myself. I have been trying to look for it lately myself, but I've also realized that there's no point seeking it, because I'd rather just be me and attract it, if that makes sense. Attract great people in my life that value my time and value my being and I theirs, and mutually supportive. So it goes back to the question of, what are you doing this weekend? That's where it all started. And what I find myself answering is, sometimes I just want to say nothing. And before I would used to be ashamed of that, but now I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm not proud, but I'm content. Because maybe something exciting happens, Maybe I'll get invited to something, or maybe I find something I want to do that really catches my interest, and I just want to do it to do it. Or I just want to stare at the wall. You know what? Why not? Why do we have to put all this emphasis and seriousness onto everything we do? It's like this hustle culture with hobbies. It's so damaging. Sometimes just let yourself create, let yourself be, without having to put labels, concepts, or something of importance on it. And sometimes there's magic in that. It can be completely quote-unquote useless, not really, and it can be something that nourishes your whole being, and it drives you, and it makes you find something new that you love doing. Maybe you find a new hobby, maybe you find a new way of doing things. Because that what happens when we try to hold onto something too hard. It becomes tiring, and it becomes exhaustive. And when you have that beginner's mind and that playful open-heartedness to something, I'm using a lot of ambiguous words here, but when you have that curiosity, that really is like watching that world like you were a child again. That makes the magic of life. Imagine you did all the right things, quote unquote, things you're supposed to do, you're so-called responsible and sensible. But for what? You're old, and now what? You saved up your pension, but your body is like decrepit and old, and you're bitter, and you didn't do the things you actually wanted to do, and you regret listening to what others said instead of listening to what your heart really wanted to do. You're going to waste your life. Well, it's not really a waste, but let's call it that. Are you going to waste your life doing what everyone else wants you to do and tell you how to live life, or are you going to live your life the way you know how the best to do? Yes, you might make some mistakes. Yes, it might not be what everyone wants you to do, but that's okay. That's okay. You get to choose the life that you want. That's the brilliance of it. Once you become free and self-loving. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You do what you want to do. And you know what's good for you. You know what's right for you. Sometimes the answer is very simple. And we complicate things way too much. And sometimes the thing we actually want, part of it is already right here and right now. Instead of chasing something from the past or the future, there's things in the present moment that you can take and say, you know what, I actually enjoy this. Instead of looking at kind of this lack mentality of saying, oh, I don't have this, I need to do that, I need to be productive. But let me tell you, a great way of being unproductive is sometimes doing everything at once, half-assing it, and not being in it, and just doing it because you have to, or because somebody told you to. When you really get into it, what you want to do and what drives you. Sure, you might need consistency and discipline to some extent, but once you get into that, life becomes so much lighter and enjoyable. And there's no wonder that I see so many people are stressed and depressed. And I'm not an exception. I've been there. And I'm still, learning as well. But it's no wonder I see so many people are stressed and depressed. When, like let's say you finally get that energy to do something. And then you overwhelm yourself with doing too much at once because you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you need to do this thing. You don't need to do anything, you're not supposed to do anything. I love the quote of Alan Watts. The point of life is simply to be alive. It's not something to feel. Just imagine for a moment. I'm not saying it's the ultimate truth. You might have a purpose, you might have a calling, you might not. But sometimes getting too caught up in the hustle and bustle of life is forgetting what is really important here and now. And you know what that is. It's all of it. It's the small things. It's looking at the flowers. I don't want to define it because it's very individual. And it happens sort of by itself when you slow down and notice, instead of having all your awareness inside your skull and moving it out different areas and just observing. And you start to see some magic. Just the sound of birds, just the feeling of wind touching your skin, and doing something you have no clue how you're doing it, but doing it anyway and having fun with it. For no reason. Other than to play with it. It's so good. I'm also hesitant to put a concept or word on that. But so whenever anyone asks you the question, what are you doing this weekend? Don't feel you don't need to feel obligated or any kind like that to feel bad or guilty about having no plans and not knowing. Just like, what are you going to be when you grow up? I don't know. That's okay. That's okay. You'll figure it out. And that can be exciting by itself. That can be enjoyable by itself. What can make you depressed and stressed is when you're like, oh, it has to be this way and only this way, and that, and then I'll be accepted, and then that's okay, and that's what's reasonable. No. Now, it doesn't mean like you have to answer when somebody asks that question, you have to give a whole spiel like I'm doing now, but you can answer it however you like. But just notice that you don't need to feel guilty about it, but not having any plans. You don't need to go out and socialize. You don't need to get drunk. You don't need someone else's validation. You don't need to have a plan. You don't need to do anything reasonable. You don't need to do anything. You can just be you, and that's good enough. You are good enough the way you are. With that said, I hope you have a great weekend and great week. And I hope to see you in the next video. And until next time.